The kitten didn't meow. It latched onto his pant leg with surprising strength, claws hooking fabric like tiny anchors. Officer Daniel Carter stopped mid-stride. One foot lifted, rain tapping against his cap and soaking the collar of his uniform. The streetlight flickered above him, washing the sidewalk in a tired yellow glow. He looked down, annoyed at first, ready to shoo the animal away. But the kitten's eyes caught him off guard. They weren't playful or curious. They were frantic, shining with a raw urgency that made his chest tighten for reasons he couldn't explain. "Hey!" "Easy," Daniel murmured, crouching. The kitten loosened its grip only to turn and sprint a few steps away, stopping to look back at him. Its tail flicked sharply, and it let out a thin, broken sound, not quite a meow, more like a plea forced through a tiny body. Daniel straightened, scanning the street. It was late, the kind of late where everything felt paused between one day and the next. No pedestrians, no cars, just rain, neon reflections, and the hum of distant sirens. "I've got a shift to finish," he said softly, mostly to himself. Still, the kitten ran back and grabbed his pant leg again, tugging hard, nearly pulling him off balance. Daniel exhaled, rubbed his face, and followed the kitten's gaze toward the narrow alley between two shuttered buildings. The darkness there felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. "All right," he muttered. "You win." The kitten released him instantly and dashed into the alley, pausing every few feet to make sure he was following. Daniel's hand rested on his radio as he stepped into the shadowed passage. Water dripped from fire escapes above, splashing into shallow puddles that rippled under his boots. The smell hit him next, old metal, wet paper, and something sour underneath it all. He moved slowly, senses alert, the training drilled into him over years rising to the surface. The kitten stopped beside a heap of collapsed cardboard boxes. It didn't run this time. It simply sat and stared at him, chest rising too fast, eyes wide and unblinking. Daniel knelt and reached out, gently lifting the top layer of soaked cardboard. His breath caught. A woman lay beneath it, curled awkwardly against the brick wall. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue, her breathing shallow and uneven. One hand clutched an empty inhaler, the other held a crumpled piece of paper smeared with rain. Daniel's pulse spiked. He radioed for medical assistance, voice steady despite the sudden weight pressing into his chest. "It's okay," he said, shrugging off his jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. "You're not alone. Help's coming." The kitten hopped onto his knee, warm and trembling, pressing close as if guarding both of them. For a moment, amid the rain and the sirens growing louder, Daniel felt something shift inside him. A quiet, unsettling certainty that this night and this small creature had already changed more than he could see. The woman's eyelids fluttered as Daniel knelt beside her, the brick wall cold and slick against his back. Her breathing rasped, each inhale shallow and uneven, like it might simply stop if no one watched closely enough. Daniel kept his voice calm as he spoke into the radio, giving their location, describing her condition, forcing himself to sound steady even as his heart pounded hard against his ribs. The alley felt too narrow now, the darkness pressing in from all sides. "It's okay," he repeated, more for himself than for her. "Stay with me." The kitten remained glued to him, its small body vibrating with nervous energy. It climbed onto his forearm, placing a paw on the woman's chest as if checking for life, then looked up at Daniel with wide, unblinking eyes. He swallowed. In all his years on the force, he'd responded to calls involving violence, accidents, and loss, but something about this silent, fragile scene felt heavier. There was no crowd, no noise, no chaos, just a life quietly slipping away in the rain. The woman stirred, her fingers tightening around the crumpled paper. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Daniel leaned closer. "Easy," he said gently. "You don't have to talk. Help's almost here." Her eyes opened, glassy and unfocused, then drifted toward the kitten. For a fleeting second, something like relief softened her expression. She tried to lift her hand, failed, and let it fall back against the cardboard. The kitten pressed closer, purring faintly, the sound uneven but determined, like it was willing the woman to keep breathing. Red and blue lights splashed against the alley walls as the ambulance arrived. Paramedics moved quickly, efficiently, their boots splashing through puddles as they assessed the woman's condition. Oxygen mask on, vitals checked, 4 prepared. Daniel stepped back just enough to give them space, but he didn't move far. The kitten refused to leave him, clinging to his shoulder now, tiny claws digging into the fabric of his uniform. "She's hypoxic," one paramedic said, glancing up. "Good thing you found her when you did." Daniel nodded, watching as they lifted the woman onto a stretcher. Her eyes fluttered open once more, and she turned her head slightly, searching. When she saw him, and the kitten perched on his shoulder, her lips curved into the faintest smile before exhaustion pulled her under again. As they wheeled her out of the alley, rain still falling steadily, Daniel followed until the paramedics stopped him at the back of the ambulance. He stood there, hands on his hips, chest rising and falling, adrenaline slowly draining away. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle pulled off, siren cutting through the night. The alley felt emptier without the urgency. Daniel looked down at the kitten, still clinging to him like it had decided he was safe enough to trust. "You did good," he murmured, stroking its soaked fur. The kitten purred louder this time, curling against his neck. As Daniel stepped back onto the street, he had no idea how deeply that small, rain-soaked rescue had already stitched itself into his future. Days passed, but the night refused to loosen its grip on Daniel's thoughts. The rain, the alley, the way the kitten's eyes had locked onto his like a promise, none of it faded the way other calls usually did. He found himself replaying small details at odd moments, the sound of the woman's breathing evening out under the oxygen mask, the warmth of the kitten curled against his neck, the crumpled note clutched in a trembling hand. It all lingered, heavy and unfinished. The kitten came home with him the night of the rescue, wrapped in a towel and tucked carefully against his chest. Daniel told himself it was temporary, just until he could find a shelter in the morning, but by sunrise the kitten was already exploring his small apartment like it belonged there. It chased dust motes in the thin light, curled up on his couch, and fell asleep purring on his chest as he sat there, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He named her Echo, because she seemed to respond to things no one else noticed. At the precinct, Daniel asked discreet questions. A few days later, he learned the woman had survived. She'd been admitted with severe asthma complications and hypothermia, but she was stable. The relief hit him harder than he expected, leaving him leaning back in his chair, eyes closed, breathing out a long, shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That should have been the end of it. Another life saved, another report filed, another story to fade into the background. But it didn't. End. A week later, the woman walked into the station. She looked different, healthier, warmer, wrapped in a borrowed coat, but her eyes were the same. When she saw Daniel, she froze, then crossed the room with slow, careful steps, like she was afraid the moment might disappear if she rushed it. Echo was tucked into Daniel's jacket pocket, her ears peeking out. "You found me," the woman said softly. Her voice trembled, but it was strong. "Alive. Both of you." Daniel nodded, unsure what to say. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothing it carefully before handing it to him. "I thought you should know what that night was supposed to be." He opened it. The words were uneven, ink blurred by rain. A goodbye letter, an apology to the world for taking up space. Daniel's throat tightened. He folded the paper back slowly, as if moving too fast might break something fragile between them. Echo wriggled free and jumped onto the counter, padding toward the woman. Without hesitation, the woman knelt and scooped her up, pressing her forehead to the kitten's. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and unstoppable. "She wouldn't leave," she whispered. "I tried to push her away. She kept coming back." Daniel watched them, understanding settling in his chest like a quiet truth. Echo hadn't just led him to the alley. She had refused to let someone disappear. And standing there, in the hum of the precinct and the ordinary noise of life continuing, Daniel realized that some rescues didn't end when the siren stopped. They echoed forward, changing everything that came after. Time moved forward in small, ordinary steps, but nothing felt quite ordinary anymore. Months slipped by, marked by routine shifts, quiet mornings, and the steady presence of Echo weaving through Daniel's life. She grew quickly, sleek and confident, still drawn to open windows and soft sounds, as if listening for calls only she could hear. Daniel adjusted around her without thinking. Feeding times, vet visits, a warm lamp left on at night. Somewhere along the way, his apartment stopped feeling like a place he slept and started feeling like a place he lived. The woman, whose name was Mira, began to reappear in unexpected ways. At first it was just updates passed along by a nurse Daniel had met at the hospital. Mira was recovering well. Then Daniel saw her himself one afternoon, standing at the hospital entrance, helping an elderly man navigate the steps. She waved when she noticed him, a shy, grateful smile crossing her face. Echo, tucked in Daniel's arms, let out a soft chirp, recognizing her before Daniel did. They talked occasionally after that, nothing dramatic, just small conversations about breathing treatments, therapy appointments, and the strange weight of being alive when you hadn't planned to be. Mira told him she had started volunteering at the hospital, sitting with patients who had no visitors, staying late so no one had to face the quiet alone. "I know what that silence feels like," she said once. "I don't want anyone else to disappear inside it." One morning, Daniel received a message asking him to stop by the hospital on his way home. He found Mira waiting in the hallway outside a patient room, her posture tense but hopeful. A doctor approached them, smiling gently. "We thought you should know," the doctor said, nodding toward Mira, "that what you did that night set off a chain reaction. She's helped 3 people seek treatment instead of giving up. Sometimes survival spreads." Daniel stood there, Echo purring steadily against his chest, and felt something inside him soften. For years he'd worn his badge like armor, believing his job was about force and control, about stepping in when things went wrong. Now he understood it was also about noticing, about stopping when something small tugged at your leg and refusing to look away. As he left the hospital, sunlight broke through the clouds, warm and unexpected. Daniel paused on the steps, looking down at Echo. She blinked up at him, calm and unremarkable, like she hadn't done anything extraordinary at all. That was when it hit him. The world didn't always change with explosions or applause. Sometimes it changed quietly, because a kitten begged, a man listened, and a life that was meant to end chose instead to echo forward, touching others in ways no one could ever fully measure.